finished theme number 1. So it's time for theme number 2. Okay, so Allison, this week we have a theme.
Yes.
Tell us what the theme is.
The theme is back to the basics.
Yes.
We're going to try to have a theme every week for the next little while here going. So
yeah,
back
we know
to
you
the
like your
basics.
themes.
Now, don't fret and just put up with us, because after back to the basics, maybe not next week, because you guys are going to love next week's, but maybe the week after that, we're going to have one. It's all about the details.
Yes, I love that one too.
It's going to be all about the details. So we're going to go through some basics this week.
Yeah.
We have a great surprise, and then back.
It's kind of nice to go back to the foundations of quilting, because no matter how long you've been quilting, there are some definite foundational steps that are good to be reminded of. Even if you know these things, they're good to be reminded of and go, you know what? I should probably incorporate that again, right?
Yes, I think so too. And we all have different basics, I think. And so I kind of love, because sometimes you've been doing something and you're like, have I been doing that the whole time? And it is really that simple. So
definitely. So I thought what would be fun to start out with today is to start out with one of my favorite topics besides binding, because I love binding. You know that. I love binding. Yeah. Send me all your binding. I'll do it for you. Ooh, be careful what I say, right?
I'm like, today is a guarantee.
But another thing that I love to talk about is rotary cutting basics.
Oh, I'm having PTSD.
I know. I was like, Allison, you need to be on here for this. Rotary cutting basics. Here we go.
Oh, I'm really scared.
Yeah. And actually, I do need one of your pieces of fabric, if that's okay. I forgot.
Okay. You can choose.
I know. I'm kind of nervous. Well, because I hate cutting into this beautiful piece, but I'll do the blue check.
Because that's your favorite gingham. You love gingham.
I love gingham. So anyway, done, Kris. Yeah. Good. Oh, they're going to all send me their quilts to be bound.
All right.
How about I teach you to bind? There you go. That's even
Candy,
better.
you can submit your funnies to Allison. ALLISON at my girlfriend's quilt shop.
You sure can.
.com.
You sure can. The funny part is when sometimes people send them to multiples of us, and if I don't catch
that's why
another
I'm saying
3 at 3
Tuesday
then
after
sometimes
4.
Yeah. There you go. Anyway, so we're going to talk about rotary cutting basics today, and there's basically 6 principles. I kind of condensed it into 6 principles that I want you to remember when it comes to cutting. So I actually have some graphics here. Here we go. So the first thing that's important is that we are going to square up the fabric. Now, this is really important, and let me show you why. So let me pull this back a little. Okay.
I'm going to move out of the way.
And I'm going to take her lovely fat quarter here, and there will be a selvage end. So more times than not, what I'll do is I will base my straight cut off of the selvage, and I will let me pull this down. Okay, so I take my selvage and I fold it in half. This is a fat quarter here, and I bring it to the top, and I kind of line it up along the top of the selvage. Okay, now this cut may not be exactly even, so you're kind of just trying to get it to be parallel to one another. And then you do what is called, let me bring my next graphic up. We're going to, I call it shimmying it. We're going to shimmy the fabric down to its natural drape. All right. So I folded it in half. I bring my other piece to the top, and then I shimmy. Shimmy meaning that I'm just doing a little, bringing it down, because if you look at it, can you see, Allison, why don't you point out where there's that bump there? Do you see
right
that?
Here.
Uh-huh.
Oh, by other
And
side right
over there. Yes.
Yes.
And so that's because it's not square. All right. So you want it to have the natural drape to bring it down. And the natural drape may not be on the folded line. You know, when fabric comes off the bolt, there's usually a fold. Don't count on the fold as being correct, because sometimes when manufacturers roll that bolt, it's not always square. So you don't want to count on the fact that there's a fold and you just automatically assume that the fold is correct. That's why it's important to bring it up to the top, shimmy it down, let the fabric fall naturally, and then smooth it out. Okay, when you do that, do you see, Allison, what's happening here?
Yep. We have uneven edges.
Uneven edges.
On both sides.
On both sides.
And on the top.
Exactly. And so that's what we want to make sure and square up first. Okay, so I'm going to put this over here. Now, the next thing you want to do is that you're going to trim the small piece off of one end after lining up the fabric to the mat. So I could choose whether to go from this end or this end. It really doesn't matter. But I'll go ahead and I'm going to do it to the right of me. And I'll tell you why I'm doing it to the right. That is because now this is just for my first trim. After I'm done with the first trim, I'm going to flip it around and go from left to right. But I'll tell you why I go this way first, is because I have more fabric on this end than I do on this end. So all I do is I find a vertical line somewhere on my mat and I go just a titch over from that line. I also am going to find a horizontal line on the mat and line up the edge of my selvage to the horizontal line so that I know it's nice and straight this way. I've gone over just a titch from here. I'm going to bring my ruler over with my rotary cutter. I'll bring this up. So again, I'm just finding a line on here. Okay, and you can see very clearly why it was important that I trim that up. Can you see that? Do you see how narrow it is over here? And then it gets wider and wider, and then it gets narrower and narrower. Had I not done that at the beginning, then what would happen is that, have you ever cut strips and there's a bend, like there's an elbow in the strip and it kind of goes like this? It's because you didn't square it up. It's because you didn't square up the fabric first. So never underestimate the importance of squaring up the fabric first, making sure it has its natural drape, trimming off the end, because again, you can see this is very tiny on this end, and then it gets bigger and bigger.
And those
then
elbows,
smaller.
I don't think they're any more apparent than when you do binding.
Yes.
I mean, you know, you get one of those and your whole binding is off.
Well, and you know, when you have troubles like squaring things up later, or it's just, it definitely affects the way your blocks come together is when you have those elbows. So again, make sure you do that. So that's one of my number one tips for people is to always trim off that small piece off the one end. After lining up the fabric to the mat, horizontal, the titch over on the vertical, and then you can trim it up. Now, the next thing I'll do, let me bring this down again, is now I flip this around and I cut from left to right. Now, here's something to make note of, okay? I'm a right-handed cutter. So that makes sense to me to go from left to right. If you are a left-handed cutter, it may be the opposite. And I'm also here to tell you there is no right or wrong way to do this. The only right way is the one you feel most comfortable cutting. So if you feel more comfortable cutting from right to left, that's totally fine. To me, logically, because we read from left to right, because the numbers on our mat go from left to right, it makes more sense to go from left to right. And my ruler is over here, right? Okay, so the next thing I want to say is that you always make sure the blade is placed back after using. And I know a lot of you recognize how important that is, because we share that quite often, right? And if we forget to do it, a lot of you let us know, which is great because it's important to, practice those safe features. So always make sure that the cutter is placed back, the blade is placed back after you're done cutting. The next thing I want you to know is that you always cut from the torso out. And I want you to avoid sawing the fabric. So let me show you an example. All right, so I'm going to line this up on my mat. Okay, let's see. I'll go right here. Let me pull this back so the words aren't in the way. All right, so I've lined it up right here, and I'm going to cut a 3-inch strip. Well, you know what? Let's cut a 2.5-inch strip. I'll keep this pretty basic for using your fabric here. So I'm going to cut a 2.5-inch strip. Now there's 2 ways I can do this. I can either use the lines on my mat, 1, 2.5, or I could use the lines on my ruler. Let me show you the pros and cons of both. So again, we're cutting from the torso out. So when I teach beginning quilting, sometimes what I'll see is people going from out, in. Not a good idea, okay? You really are going to have so much more leverage by going from torso out, doing nice even pressure all the way down. All right, so I'm going to go to my 2.5-inch line. All right, and then I want you to notice what I just did, and I'll talk about it in a minute. I'm going to pull this back down, and look, I have a nice strip, nicely cut strip. All right, now I use the lines on the mat. If you put 100 quilters in a room and you ask them, do you use the lines on the mat or do you use the lines on the ruler? You're going to get 100 different answers, okay? A lot of people will say, don't trust the lines on your mat because your mat can warp and so forth. I don't see it happening that often, so I use both. I use my mat. I also use my ruler. But let me show you what happens when I turn my fabric like this, and I only use the lines on my ruler. I'm doing this demonstration to show you you don't have to use the mat. All right. So let me pull my 2.5-inch here. I'm going to start down at my torso. Whoops. There we go. Apply nice even pressure. I'm going to crawl my hands up and go all the way, pull it back in. And now I have a nicely cut strip as well. All right. Now, once you get more comfortable with this, what some people like to do is they do something what we might call as speed cutting, where they actually begin from the right and move down to the left if they know the numbers that it's going to go into. So let's say we're doing 2-inch strips. First of all, we'd have to trim off that edge, right? Because it's not even. I'm not going to cut it right now, but if I were, I could go 2 inches, cut, pull back, 2 inches, cut, pull back, 2 inches, cut, pull back, 2 inches, cut. And that is a speedier method of cutting because you're not constantly lifting up the ruler up and down and doing that. You are just going here, 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 and it just keeps sliding down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So the other thing I want to reiterate is that, did you notice how I walked my fingers up the ruler? I was applying even pressure as I was getting there. So oftentimes a lot of people will say, how do I prevent my ruler from slipping? Well, the reason why your ruler slips is because if we are just applying pressure down here and we're cutting it, what happens is when we get up there, and it goes like this. So, a few recommendations. One, you apply the pressure where the rotary cutter is at. You slow down. Don't try to go so fast. Just slow down, stop, pause, walk the fingers up. Notice I didn't even take it up and pull my fingers up because I don't want to take any chance of the ruler moving. So I'm going here, I start here, I walk up, I walk up, I walk up. So my hand, my fingers are still giving even pressure all along as I do this. Now, you can use other items on the market like a gypsy gripper, which is something we often use around here. You know, that little phone. I call it my little phone telephone.
Oh, I never thought of that.
And it's, you know, where you have your hands resting up above the ruler. That's important. Could that be important? That's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So keeping your hands above the ruler is really great. You know that we love like grippy spray. You could spray on the back of your rulers, and that helps, you know, to prevent from slipping. Yeah, Quilter Select rulers are wonderful. Creative Grizz rulers are wonderful. They have a little bit of, you know, a slippery, let's see, like it
like
prevents from
residue. Yeah,
it prevents it from slipping. So there's lots of ways to make sure that your ruler does not slip on you. But one of the best ways I found without extra rulers or anything is one, take your time. Okay. Right? Take your time. And two, walk your fingers up. Okay. At first, it seems a little boring, a little redundant,
a little time consuming, maybe.
Yeah. But I promise you, it's better than cutting a finger. Just ask Allison.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I still don't have feeling in my finger.
Actually will. You don't? Oh, and you actually will get better at it. The more you practice, the better you will get, the faster you will become, the more precise you will be. Okay. My hand reminded me of the theme from the Addams Show family.
I was going to say that, Teresa.
Because I have black on. That's probably why. Yeah. So it's just like, doop, doop, doop. There we go. Yeah, Eileen, I like that. Slow and steady wins the race. And really, you know, cutting actually can, I know it's very tedious, but it can be very therapeutic too.
Right.
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 So I don't know. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. It's one of those things that you think to yourself, you know what? It's the necessary evil. I've got to cut it. If I want to sew it, I got to cut it, right?
I took a class and they said if even one of your blocks is an eighth an inch off, or even all of your blocks is an eighth an inch off, and you put 16 blocks on there.
Well, it snowballs.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. You know?
Yeah. So anyway, it's just one of those things. Rotary cutting basics, so important to know, especially as a quilter, you know, getting back to those foundational steps. Take your time, walk your hands across that ruler. You can use the lines on the ruler. You could use the lines on your mat. You can work from left to right. You can work from right to left. What are you most comfortable with? If you're doing speed cutting, go from right to left and then pull it down. If you're a righty, if you're a lefty, you're going to go the opposite. Making sure to square up your fabric. So important. Again, it's one of those things that we oftentimes will just go, it's fine. I'm just going to count on the fold, you know, and don't count on the fold. How many times have you seen the fabric and that selvage is off, right?
Yes.
So very, very important. Yes, you can always use an AccuQuilt. For those of you who have an AccuQuilt, they're awesome. But if you don't have one or you don't know, you know, maybe there's times when an AccuQuill isn't going to work for a certain project you're doing. We're all bound to have to cut at one time or another.
Right.
Okay.
And don't cut tired. I mean, that's the thing. Just don't cut tired.
Yeah. Don't cut tired. Don't cut in a rush. Now, for a minute, I want to talk about the difference between some blades, because this is a question we often get asked as well. There's the three most common blade millimeters are 60, 45, and 28. Okay, so the 60, here's a couple of examples of the 60. They're both wonderful. Why would somebody get a 60 over a 45? Okay, this is the most commonly used one. But why would you get a 60 out of 40 rather than a 45?
Well, I'll tell you when I would use a 60 is if I was cutting batting
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
flexi-foam or anything thick
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
If I was cutting multiple layers.
Multiple layers would be
I
a good thing.
Yeah.
Our kit cutters often use 60 millimeter blades because they're going through so many fabrics at one
Right.
time. So definitely the flexi foam,
Right.
that would be a
Fleece.
definite time.
Fleece, I would use a
minky.
60. Yeah, anything that
Mhm.
was a little bit thicker.
Yeah, but your most common go-to is going to be the 45.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the one that I'm the most comfortable with. But a lot of people
Because the 60 is scary.
The 60 is scary. Yeah, it's scary. It's a big blade. It is a big blade for sure.
I mean, that would take off a hand, not just a finger.
That's right. Exactly. So I like both of them for sure, but 45 is definitely my go-to. Let me tell you, if you are sawing your fabric, do you know what I mean when I say sawing? Are you doing this? There's the number one reason why you need to stop doing that. It's going to shred your fabric.
Right.
On the side, right?
Right. You never get a clean.
You know what that means? It means you need a new blade. Do yourself a favor and get a new blade. I mean, seriously, it is like when you have a new blade, the heavens have opened.
Oh, seriously. And you're like, why did I use that other one?
Why did I wait so long? Exactly. Don't wait so
like
long
a new needle on your
to
machine.
change it.
Ugh.
Exactly. Get yourself a new blade. It will slice through like butter, and everyone is just as happy as can be. When we get new blades in the kit room, you would think it was Christmas, right? Because it's like, oh, I don't have to sew. No sawing your fabric.
Right. You just end up with a sawtooth mountain on the side.
Have any of you ever accidentally, this was me. One time I pulled out some new blades and I didn't realize there were actually two blades together. And so I put two blades in the rotary cutter. Has that happened to any of you? And I went to cut it and it was just the most horrid cut ever. And I was like, what is going on? This is a brand new blade. And I realized it was cutting it almost twice. So you got like the saw. It was shredding all over the place.
So we did have a
Yes,
question.
Gloria
What's
says
the
she's
safest
done that.
way
Marianne's
to take
done
them
it.
out?
Well, I'll tell you what, this cutter right here is the, what do they call it? The Splash Quick Change one. And this one is actually really easy to take out because all you have to do on the back is you pull it down and it just comes right out. Whoops, there we go. All right. And so that one is really nice. You put it back in, and then this just flips up.
Pretend you're feeding a horse. Flat palm.
Flat palm. Oh, that's a good point. Flat palm. And it's the easy, quick change. It's wonderful. Okay. When flat palm, be very, very careful. I always will take like my plastic cases that these are in. I'll put the old one in there before I throw it away.
Yep.
Yeah. So definitely quick change. When Alpha came out with that one, it was just one of my most favorite things. By the way, this can be for right-handed or left-handed. All right. So Quilter Select is a easy one to change as well. It's very similar to this where you just pull it down and it comes right out. So it's very nice. So yeah, definitely be careful. There was a comment earlier I wanted to pull up, and Yeah, it's so hard to separate the blades, Jen said. Yeah, it can be. So you have to be very careful because it's like it's a little oily. So you just kind of have to push them across, but the surface, but not around the blade.
Yeah, sometimes
just
I
kinda-
use a little bit of tape right in the middle.
Oh, that's a good idea.
You know, so I'll just put that tape on there and just slide it down.
Yeah, there was a comment, I can't find it, but it was whoever mentioned about starching your fabric beforehand.
Yes.
That was a
Oh,
really good
absolutely.
comment, because that will be another thing that will help you get better precision cuts out, is to starch your fabric. And someone asked, would you iron the fold out? Yes,
Yes.
I would iron the fold out.
Always.
Mhm.
I would too.
Yeah. Yep. So, let's see. Oh,
A
yeah.
stiletto?
Oh, that's a good idea. Sherry says she saves hers to cut paper.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I
if you
think that's
had
a
like
great
another
idea.
rotary cutter that you used, and I would write paper on it, and then you could take those old blades and cut paper. That's an excellent idea.
Yep.
Okay. Kinsey
Oh, look at
says
this good
she has
idea.
a separate case that says old for her old ones, and she uses it for paper cutting or something else. Yeah.
Yeah. When you're separating it.
Oh, good idea, Gloria. That's what I was asking. I have a little magnet that I use to help separate the blades. I didn't even think about that.
That's a
But
great
that is a
idea.
great idea. I
Mhm.
like that a lot. And Debbie uses a stiletto to separate the new blades. Excellent. I love that. Oh, great, great ideas, you guys.
Are the blades interchangeable with different manufacturers?
Yeah, most of them are. Yes, most of them are. Not all. So you
Right.
have to definitely check kind of the way that blade, the center hole is.
Yes.
But most of them are pretty interchangeable, but I will say not all of them are. All right. Oh, that's interesting. I just cleaned out a Parmesan cheese container because it flips open nicely, and I can put my sharps in it.
Yeah, great idea,
Great
Betty
tip.
Jo.
Yeah. All right. And
Yes.
Anne Marie, I put my old ones in my Flower Ninja for separating while strip piecing. Oh, yeah. I had to think for a minute what
Put
the
that
Flower Ninja is.
Oh,
But
yeah, it's great.
yes, that's true.
And
It's
you
the
can
little,
do the threads and yeah.
yeah, we have that on our website. Thank you. I should have brought that on to show you.
Yes.
So anyway, I hope that information helped today. As we get back to the basics this week, really rethink how you rotary cut. Make sure and do all those tips that I shared with you today, and you should have a lot more success. All right, so that takes us we're done with theme number 1 and theme number 2. So it's time for theme number 3.